I've recently been covering a lot of early Clone Wars lore, and with the Bad Batch currently airing, clones are top of mind for a lot of people. So today we're going to look at how the Empire resurrected the program to create a clone army years after the Battle of Endor in-universe, but in the real world years before the Clone Wars were explored at all by the prequels. When Grand Admiral Thrawn returned from his supposed exile in the unknown regions to take command of the Empire after years of Rebel and then New Republic gains, which I've conveniently covered in a series of animated breakdowns, the Empire was in a precarious position. Thrawn returned basically at the point where the New Republic had secured themselves as the new galactic hegemon, following the seizure of Coruscant and subsequent campaigns against Isan Isard, Warlord Zinj, and the Greater Maldrude. Warships were a problem for all sides, but equally challenging was a lack of personnel in an empire which had displayed a complete lack of leadership and failed to capture the hearts and minds of the galaxy. People really weren't lining up to join the Imperial Army. Gilad Pellaeon, captain of Thrawn's flagship Chimera, noted the poor quality of personnel the Empire had to work with fairly early on in the Thrawn trilogy. The Empire was relying on inexperienced conscripts to man their ships, and the Stormtrooper Corps was basically beginning to consist of anyone who they could shove into the armor from other forces, rather than the Stormtroopers being part of the Imperial elite, although service records do indicate their aim against major protagonists was consistent with earlier results. This isn't directly spoken about anywhere that I can remember, but I do think an additional layer to this is that the Empire had been pushed to the northern parts of the Outer Rim, a region that's as a whole traditionally less populated by humans proportionally than, say, the core or mid-rim, although there definitely were still significant numbers of human colonies out there. This couldn't have been helpful for their numbers given specious human-only policies when it came to their military and political positions, albeit with a few exceptions making it into those ranks like Thrawn himself. To solve the problem with shipbuilding, Thrawn attempted to hire ship thieves like Niles Ferrier, and he attempted to steal New Republic capital ships himself at battles like that of Sluy Van, and he even turned to hunting down old legends like the missing Katana fleet to varying success, but that's not really our focus for today. In the areas it did work, like the capture of nearly 200 Dreadnought-class heavy cruisers of the lost Katana fleet, it just exacerbated the other issue, which is our topic for today, the lack of personnel. This personnel problem affected far more than just the Empire. While Thrawn needed about 50,000 people to manage Dreadnought, we're also not quite at 50,000 subscribers on this channel, which you can help fix by liking and subscribing for more. Luckily, Thrawn had a solution for this problem, cloning, which various governments and YouTube has told me is illegal or unethical in applying to my subscriber problem. When Thrawn took over the Imperial forces, one of his primary goals was tracking down old storehouses of secret Imperial technology hidden away by Palpatine, and he found a jackpot at Wayland, a planet which had been secretly removed from most databases. On top of other interesting tech like cloaking devices, Thrawn was able to access a large bank of cloning vats called Sparty cylinders, stored in a facility on Wayland called Mount Tantus, a name which may be familiar if you've been watching Bad Batch, even if you haven't read the Thrawn trilogy before. Now keep in mind, this was a long time before the prequels had come out, so the specific ideas of what made up the Clone Wars were still very much in flux, from basic information like who was fighting whom, and more specifics like where the clones were grown. It'd be basically another decade before fans started hearing the word Camino. Over time, Wayland evolved into being one of many supplemental cloning centers growing troops for the Republic on top of Camino in the lore. When this was all first introduced, the implication was more that this was technology Palpatine had taken from the mad clone masters who had assaulted the Republic and kept for his own study or use, which is, funnily enough, a bit more in line with what we see in the Bad Batch. Though to be entirely clear, this was by no means a clean bit of lore at any point, so interpretations will vary as will individual sources, some of which aren't the easiest to find anymore. One problem which Thrawn had to solve in this original conception was how to grow troopers fast enough to make a difference in the immediate conflicts he was fighting. Even the clone army of the Republic took a decade to grow, and Thrawn only had a matter of months. The Thrawn trilogy posited that one of the issues with cloning, especially accelerated cloning, was that a kind of Force imprint existed in the clones, and a connection between the clones and their original sources existed as well. Memories of the original being would slowly drive the clone mad as they emerged in their mind, leading to situations like the Clone Wars conception where it was just a bunch of mad clones attacking the Republic. Thrawn solved this through the use of the Ysalamari, creatures found on the planet Mercure, which created a kind of bubble eliminating the Force's influence in an area, which could be used to shut down a Jedi's power, but would also allow Thrawn to speed up the growth of the clones by a huge margin by filling the Mount Tantus storehouse with them, avoiding the madness seen in other clones. While you don't usually hear about clone madness when it comes to the Clone Wars and the Grand Army of the Republic, there actually were a few stories where they were connected, like that of Alpha O2, who I've spoken about pretty recently on the channel. When paired with a process called flash learning, where the training of clones was done by imprinting information on them as they grew, this allowed Thrawn to get himself a massive clone army very quickly. Not long after Thrawn had taken command of the Empire and started his assault on the New Republic, he and the New Republic were fighting over the aforementioned Katana fleet, with each side racing to get as many of the derelict dreadnoughts as they could. During the battle, Luke and Han encountered many clones who had come from Thrawn's very recent cloning program, and despite the methods Thrawn had been using to allow himself to expedite their growth, Luke still felt the minds of the clones in the Force were very alien, possibly because they had been formed so recently. Notably, during that battle, Wedge Antilles comments on how the issues impacting the Imperial Army didn't seem to apply to the Starfighter Corps, because the pilots he was dogfighting against were quite skilled. In my opinion, this is meant to imply that the pilots in those starfighters were clones as well, which Wedge just wouldn't have known about yet. But again, that's my interpretation, your mileage may vary on that one. The Thrawn trilogy itself doesn't explore the clones directly very much, but from future books like the Hand of Thrawn duology and some of the other source books, we know Thrawn focused on cloning some of the most accomplished Imperial military figures, rather than just doing one clone template. Fighter pilots were cloned from Imperial aces like Baron Soontir Fel, who had actually been sent to join the Empire of the Hand, Thrawn's private empire, by Isard before Thrawn's return, so no one really knew where he was except for Thrawn. And other famous templates included General Maximilian Veers from Empire Strikes Back. Thrawn tried to make at least one full clone of himself, intending that clone to be a replacement if something were to happen to him, and then he hid the cloning cylinder holding this all-important clone beneath the capital of the Empire of the Hand. Other specialized experiments were tried as well, including attempts to splice his own military mind with the body of other soldiers, as happened with the clone Major Groden Tierce, who used some of the strategic genius he'd inherited from Thrawn and enlisted the help of a con artist named Flim to portray Thrawn, tricking the Empire into believing Thrawn had already returned. This almost coincided with the emergence of the actual full Thrawn clone, but Luke Skywalker and Mara Jade killed that clone before it was released, 10 years after the death of the original Thrawn. Other cloning experiments happened outside even Thrawn's own plans. Jorus Sabayoth, an insane Jedi Master and himself a clone of the original Jedi Master Joruus Sabayoth, had served as the protector of the Mount Tantus facility on Wayland, and he struck up a deal with Thrawn, lending his Force talents to Thrawn, in exchange for Thrawn capturing Luke and Leia as apprentices for him. Thrawn kept failing to do this, so instead a clone of Luke was made by Sabayoth before being killed by Mara Jade as well. In the short term, this cloning program did give the Empire a massive and much needed personnel boost, but it didn't last. Thrawn's death coincided with the destruction of the Sparty cylinders in the Wayland storehouse, and the cloning program came to a quick close. While the production of clones may have ended, plenty were still able to be found throughout the galaxy. Some would have remained in Imperial service directly, as did the false Groden Tierce, and the Thrawn clone went undetected in development for years, along with some speculation in-universe that there may actually have been another Thrawn clone in development out there. The Hand of Thrawn duology also has Han and Leia meet a family, the Devis, posing as a big batch of brothers living the farming life on the planet Pakrik Minor, but they're actually a set of Soontir Fel clones put in place by Thrawn as a last line of defense for the galaxy. Rather than working within the Imperial military directly, they and other groups like them were instilled with a deep love for their homes, and left as sleeper cells across the galaxy to oppose outside threats, which they likely finally had the chance to do 25 years after the Battle of Yavin, when the Yuuzhan Vong started to invade the Star Wars galaxy. That war was a horrifyingly devastating galaxy-wide conflict, so if there were any of those clone sleeper cells around, they almost certainly participated in it. That's going to do it for our look at the Imperial cloning program, though. Thank you for watching, remember to like and subscribe if you've enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you next time.